Hello, family, and welcome to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name is Betty Guadagno, and today I am joined by Mas. And Mas is a multiple near-death experiencer, spiritually transformative experiencer. He's developed this amazing tool called XI to assist the collective in changing their frequency, which, as he says, change your frequency, change your life. And I'm really excited that you've decided to come on the podcast today and share with our community. So I'm going to toss it right over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. So my name is Mas Sajady, and through two near-death experiences, it's really allowed me to understand who we are at a very deep level. So first near-death really allowed me again to understand the concepts of our limitless potential, or that limitless being that we know that we are. The second one allowed me to understand the mechanics on how this reality works. So Xponential Intelligence is literally a guidebook on how to access your limitless potential that we all have deep inside. Like, when you're a kid, you feel very limitless. You could literally do anything, but then over time, that feeling starts to degrade, and then people think, well, reality sets in and so on like that. But from what I've seen and what I've worked on, hundreds of thousands of live, client sessions, over the decade, our research has shown that limitless concept of who we are as a child is actually true. You don't have to age the way you do. You don't have to get diseased the way you do. You can have success and be happy. You can have that spiritual knowing or acknowledgement. So. And that's what exponential intelligence does, or becoming exponentially intelligent really gets us to do. It allows us to go back and do things the right way. So we don't have to destroy ourselves. We don't have to control or be in lack. Because if you think about anything that you do in this reality, that we live in, it's all about lack and control and sacrifice. No matter what you do, if you're loving somebody, you usually have to say sacrifice some part or some aspect of you to love that individual. If you're trying to do good in the world, you literally have to say create lack for yourself, or again sacrifice yourself. You don't have to do that. You're a limitless being. To me, it's a timeless being. And so I've figured out a way to go back to being that, say, grand spiritual being that we all know we are. Okay? Now, people who are religious or spiritual, they'll call it your spirit. I'm on the science side, but I see both sides. I would say that it's your timeless being. So you have a timeless component to yourself. You have a time-bound component to yourself. And the key is to, harmonize the two. And as you harmonize the two, you start to integrate, or you start to connect with your, again, limitless potential that you have. That you have being a spirit, and you start to bring that into this concept of reality, this concept of time and space. And it gets really, really cool from there, because it's a merging of spirituality and science. So literally, exponential intelligence, again, turns all that fuzzy logic that's out there about spirituality, and then that not unknowing aspect of science, merging them together to bring you a pure science on how to become your best possible version of who you are, not just for yourself, but how to transform your world, your loved ones, and then also the world. So becoming exponentially intelligent, or rising to a higher level of consciousness, one would say, would solve the problems of this reality, of this world that we live in. So.
Thank you for sharing that. So I wrote down some stuff while you were talking. Some stuff came to me talking about like how in our collective, many people feel like they have to sacrifice a piece of themselves in order, just kind of to survive. Like we develop all of these special relationships with other people where we put their priorities above our own. So how do you tap into that limitlessness? Like, how do you tap into, well, I mean, in A Course in Miracles, they would say making a special relationship, a holy relationship. And I feel like you're kind of on the same path. So that's how my brain is breaking it down anyway. So how do you tap into that limitlessness?
Yeah. Well, first of all, most people connect to that limitlessness or that holy path by seeking something outside of themselves. Say like a higher consciousness, whether it's angels, spirit guides. Some people channel, their great grandma, or like say John of God, he channeled dead doctors. I mean, that's what he said, right? He channels dead doctors. So it's always, or even if you want to say connect to God, it's outside of you, right? However you define God or a spiritual being. So those, and that's the problem. The problem is it's always outside of yourself. But the key is that if you awaken from the inside, I call it your inner expansion. You started to awaken. You started to connect that timeless self that you are into the time-bound self. So there's your timeless self here, your time-bound self here, and then there's all these layers that distort you. Okay. So what you want to do is have as few layers as you can between your timeless and your time-bound self, or your spirit and yourself. That's really the key. You can't go outside of yourself to do that. You would have to understand how you create yourself in this reality. How can a timeless person or a timeless, say, being transform into a physical being? Okay, it's a huge magic trick. So your purpose in life, by the way, if you've ever wondered what your purpose in life is about understanding the magic trick. And then once you understand the magic trick, you can pull in, you can render, or you can create all those things that, again, that allow you to be your optimal self or your limitless self into this physical form. So one aspect, again, is to understand the connection between your higher self and your physical being here. In other words, and again, most people go outside. They study, which is totally cool. But they study religions, they study spirituality, they study under a mentor, they go hide in a cave or whatever that they do. But the key is that whenever you're seeking outside of yourself, you'll always lose that connection. And it actually takes you further away from your goal. You can use those things and go inside yourself.
So, okay, some stuff's coming up for me. So we're talking about, well, I'm kind of perceiving it as layers. Like I need, or I perceive that I need like a cheat code almost. So like if I can focus my energy on a spirit guide instead of like coming into like this realization that I am limitless, the spirit guide maybe can be the thing that helps me understand that if I feel like I have a connection to the divine in some way. So it's kind of like the way that I perceive it is like walking up steps, like each step is getting me closer and closer to my limitless potential, but I require aids because my layers of awareness are just like not there yet, so how do you feel about some people like using that as a tool to get them to sort of what you're talking about?
Oh, now using aids, using spirit guides, using, again, your dead grandma or whatever, that you connect to, there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that people start to use that aid that's supposed to help them, and then it turns into a crutch. Right. So whether, again, it's spirit guides, or whether it's plant medicines, or whether it's a religion or a belief system and so on like that, they start to lose themselves more and more because they transfer their power into the spirit guide, and they go, without that spirit guide, I'm nothing. Without that belief system, I'm nothing. So you go further and further away from, say, the goal that you stated earlier, right, about finding yourself. So again, there's nothing wrong with that, but you want to use those tools that are out there to allow you to connect to a higher source. Again, make you stronger, but in most cases, it makes you weaker. If you look at anybody that, say, any guru, so to speak, in the beginning, right, they got stronger and stronger, and then towards the end, they become very violent, they become abusive, they use a lot of people, so on like that, because they lost themselves. It wasn't the right path. The right path, it would be a Jesus or a Buddha or a Muhammad, or great individuals like that again found themselves more and more and more as they ascended up that ladder, or that the stairs, as you would call it.
Okay, yeah. So I'm curious, you're mentioning all of these great spiritual teachers, and I'm curious, did you grow up in an environment where you were exposed to that, or are these all things that came into your awareness after your spiritual experiences?
Well, my family, we grew up, in a specific religion, but then, my dad was a doctor, and he believed in the sciences, so he started to question, all the religions. And as I grew up, well, I studied, a lot of the religions, because I just wanted to be, my best possible self. I wanted to have that dream life on what could be possible out there. So, people would say, hey, you know what, you find a religion, and you go for it, you learn it, and everything's okay. But look at anybody, and again, it's not the religion, it's how you practice those religions. And there's a lot of people that practice religions or spiritual customs and so on like that, or even science on the science side, or even atheism, whatever. None of those individuals are really, really happy. So what's that one key component? People go, well, if I make a hell of a lot of money, I'll be happy. If I become, spiritual, I'll become happy. If I do X, I'll be happy. But again, going back to, say, a great teacher, Jesus, not the religion, but the actual man, he said there's only one path. And, again, they say it's through him. But again, it's basically accepting whatever that is. And I'm not Christian in any way. I'm not anything in any way. But that one path is to awaken. How do you awaken? It all goes back to that one concept of, again, knowing that you're a high spiritual being in physical form, and then clearing out those layers in between. And that's the key. Most people throw in more layers, which go further and further away.
Okay, I understand what you're saying now. Now I feel like I'm there with you. I love how you interpreted that line that Jesus says that it's not through like Christ, it's through awakening. And
Right.
and I think that that's a great interpretation of that
Yeah.
line. It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So before we were kind of talking, well, okay, one of the questions I have is, what do you think the purpose of mystical experiences is? Like some people have these mystical experiences, some people do not. Some people come back from near-death experiences, they have all of this information that they'd like to share. Like, what are the purpose of mystical experiences?
Well, I guess I'd have to know what your definition of mystical experiences is, because life in itself is a mystical experience to me, because I look at life here and that's really the key, for what I've done and how I teach, my students, is that your physical being here is not real. This is just that mirage. This is that mystical experience that you have. Your spirit, or your timeless self, is the real being. So this reality is the mystical, say, experience to me, for example. And it's an amazing mystical experience. It's amazing what we could do here. So, but I think you're referring to the unknown or the unseen, right? Yeah. So the unknown and the unseen it's those possibilities. It's those little clues that gives us, it's like, gosh, you know what? There's a grander being, there's a grander possibility out there for us. So those mystical experiences like near deaths and so on shouldn't be shunned by science, and it shouldn't morph into some, say, fuzzy logic by spiritual people. We should understand it's like, hey, there's so many people who've had like near-death experiences that have had, say, amazing experiences. There's so many people who have had mystical experiences that we should actually study it and start to know the science behind it. And that's really the key, again, merging and knowing the science, because once you know and once you understand, say, the science behind it, we can all access a higher potentiality of who we are. I wanted to say one more thing. So it really, another aspect about mystical, say, experiences, again, is that once we understand, say, the concepts or the logic behind it, it doesn't become mystical anymore. All science at one time was, say, magic and, unbelievable. But then once we knew the science behind it, it became common day for us. Does that make sense? So
yeah, it does. Do we want to get to that point where these things are not magical and we could like get down to the science of it?
Absolutely, because we're just treading water here. We're still treading in the same consciousness that humans treaded like thousands of years ago. We're still trying to define all those things. But the cool thing is that as it becomes normal everyday life or common knowledge, just like back in the day, people didn't believe in airplanes, or people didn't believe in wireless technology. And now it's like a common everyday thing, right? People would shun it, people would ridicule it. Those are the three stages that, at first people, ridicule it, and then they shun it, and then it becomes common everyday, say, practice or knowledge. Right. And that's how we expand. So it's like you're going, well, there's going to be no mysticism once we figure it out. No. You get into the higher realms of what could be that I've gone into. It's like, and the things that we can do at those higher realms, at that higher levels of consciousness, far outweigh any mystical experience that most people have had in this reality. If you imagine you're at a level 0 consciousness, again, where you can create density to experience yourself, most people who have mystical experiences go to that level 1 consciousness, and that's about it. Level 1. But there's infinite levels of consciousness above. So if we conquer, or if we understand level 1 consciousness, we can all go, gosh, I wonder what mystical experiences are in level 2 consciousness. I wonder, and you conquer that, and then you keep going, well, what's in level 3 consciousness? The experiences get more and more, and the amazingness of who we are get to, it allows us to expand. So we'll never run out of mystical experiences. Don't worry about that.
Okay. So, well,
Yeah.
okay. Now I'm kind of like playing devil's advocate in my own mind. Pardon the
Absolutely.
verbiage, but so I'm curious. Then, why are we having a human experience? If our idea is to raise our frequency to a point where we're coming into pure awareness, then what is the purpose of having this human experience?
Oh, absolutely. Well, like Einstein said, that, if it wasn't for time and space, everything would happen all at once. Again, you're limitless beings. So if you're a limitless being, again, it's all fantastic. But being a limitless being, again, contrary to belief, is you're literally a void, right? Because you'd have to be nothing to be everything, if that makes sense. And that goes, into a deeper consciousness. But then how do you define who you really are? Okay. One of the best ways is to, say, experience things in linear fashion, hence time and space, or the creation of time and space. So the reason why you're here in this physical form is it allows you to reflect back who you are and see the possibilities or the beauty that you really are. And then you get to really embrace who you are. This is where, again, when people flip that around from being, say, a physical being, thinking that there's some spiritual aspect of themselves that they want to connect to. If you flip that around to go, I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience, and I want to understand it. This is where life becomes really beautiful. And this is where you, say, play with your higher self even more. This is where you can, again, define who you are. Because without that reflection or reference point, you're everything all at once, which is great. But it's even cooler if you could really experience and cherish, say, a morsel at a time.
Nice. Okay. So some more stuff coming up.
Mhm.
Okay. So you mentioned something about like level 0 consciousness awareness, right?
Yeah.
And then like maybe near death experience, you jump up to level 1. And then
Mhm.
just to reflect back what you're just saying now, about like coming into this awareness, like that's the beauty of this experience, starting at level 0 consciousness and then
Mhm.
remembering. So what created level 0 consciousness? Did we as a higher aspect of ourselves create this low consciousness experience?
Yes. So at a higher level, again, since we all, we all got together as grand beings, and we wanted to experience all that was, right. So in order to become or experience all that was, we separated ourselves into, say, spiritual beings. So that's the first phase. So we are one, and that's the notion that everybody talks about. We're one. We actually are one, right? We have all possibilities. So you imagine this fear coming in, and then it's like, gosh, how can we experience everything that could be? So it's like, well, we'll separate ourselves into spiritual beings, spiritual components of that oneness, right? And that oneness is not God, by the way, or because you'd have to have a source outside of yourself. So just so to create something, right? You can't be in the same level. So the first step, again, is a separation of that into our spiritual beings, and then from there, it's like, wow, this is really, really cool. But then it's like we want more. We want to design it more. So we come into, say, what you said, a low level state. It actually is a very high level state for a spiritual being to create, say, an experience, a physical experience where you can actually, say, do all the things that you do. That's a high level state to be. It takes a high level, say, of intelligence, right, to create something that is miraculous as this reality here, or evolve into, say, a being that is so intricate as a human being. I mean, look at all the technology that goes into you. Uh, it's crazy, right? Where's that intelligence? It's like, oh my God. So we created that to again be as precise as we can with our, say, experiences. Um,
Okay. So I really love that reflection on what the human experience is
mhm,
like, because the human experience for some people can seem very damning. And so that's like where I want to go with this conversation, because
of
well,
course.
I've been in some of your workshops and I listened to some of your talks that you've done with Ions. I've been present for them. So I
Mhm.
already know a lot about your philosophy on life.
Right.
And so I believe, if my understanding is correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you don't
Mhm.
believe in pre-birth planning, but you do believe that we are somehow creators of this.
Um, well, if well, let me ask you, if people were, I do believe in, say, pre-birth planning, in a sense that you're a product of evolution. Okay.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
I totally believe in that. But, most people go, well, I chose this life and so on, like that. But if you really, really chose your life, again, I believe you're a product of evolution. And then you're basically an extension of your parents, right? And that's so, in that sense, if you're an extension of your parents, then and then when you are in physical form, you want to get away from your parents. Well, then, and change and be different. That's when you start to realize it's like, oh crap, especially when you're 0 to 7 years old, it's like, dang, I want to be very different. You start to understand the realities of your parents, and you want to be different by the time, you're 18 years old. So that, that should prove to us really that we didn't really choose that experience. And then look at all the experiences that people have over and over and over and over again. So from lifetime after lifetime, we have the same experience. Look at your again, look at generational patterns. All those things are signs to me that you didn't pre-plan it. You just had what mom and dad had. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So you weren't
but
that
how do,
awakened.
okay,
That's
so how do you explain people who like completely, okay, so like nature versus nurture, or like people who do
Mhm.
not succumb to like the generational line of their families?
For the most part, again, those individuals who don't succumb to the generational patterns is like, again, we don't evolve, so it's the nature part, right? The evolutionary process of your genes, coming together, creating another being. But then the nurture part is that, and that's the key. That's our opportunity to really change and transform. But in human societies, the human species don't learn and transform, and that's why we repeat the same thing. That's why our grandparents had heart issues, and then our children, we have propensity to have heart issues, for example. Our great grandparents. So the product of evolution, the system works really, really well. Right? The system of evolution works well. It's been refined for, I would say, trillions of years. I mean, look at nature. It's amazing, right? And it's perfection. But humans, again, have free will, right? And we can get into a whole different subject on why we have free will and so on like that. But the key is that we're not using that free will. We're literally recycling because we're not awakened enough to understand and evolve into a higher, say, being. So back to your question on, people separating from their family, they still age the same way. They might do very, very different things, like say their family was poor, and and the child is wealthy, or vice versa, or the family was really spiritual or religious, and the child is different, or again, but they age the same. Their trajectory of life is all the same, whether they were poor or wealthy, whether they were religious or not religious, or vice versa. Their end outcome, their bottom line on how they experience life is the same. And I think that's really important to understand. People think it's like, well, what I'm doing is going to make a difference in my life, and it's not. People go, well, if I become wealthy, then that's when I'll really start to understand myself, right? That's where I can expand into my being. And it doesn't work that way. People who are on the spiritual path, they go, well, if I'm spiritual, that's where I'll start to expand myself. But again, most people lose their identity. They sacrifice themselves, and that's their own. Your purpose in life, no matter what you're doing, you only have a single purpose, is to understand who you really are. Whether you're making love, having a great relationship, trying to save the planet, trying to be kind, no matter what it is, it's always going back to understanding or experiencing who you are. Right? Or to have a greater understanding of who you are. But people, again, they get stuck in the experience going, if this is the right way, this is the right path. But then they reach that path and they go, gosh, I didn't define myself. I'm further away from that goal than I was ever before. So again, that's the importance of it. And then once you understand that, this is where you can literally, I would say change your genetics. You don't have to age like society does. You don't have to get diseased like society does. You don't have to do all those things that basically are wrong in society. Look at society. There's a lot of great things there, but there's a lot of not so great things that we don't have to repeat again, right? So that repetition really tells us that we're doing the same thing over and over.
Okay, so you're talking about remembering or being in that state of knowing who you are. And when you're saying that, you don't mean like an individual personality, you mean remembering who you are as a spiritual being?
Yes. So knowing that you are a grand being. And then if you come from that space and actually tap into that power of being a grand being, this is where the problems in your life resolve. Okay. This is where, again, you become abundant naturally, where you become successful, happy. This is where you understand your spiritual, say, purpose, and everything comes together, because that's what a grand being is, right? And people start to separate that. People go, well, if you're spiritual, you shouldn't have money and all this stuff. But, a grand being or a spiritual being is some being that is limitless in all aspects. There is no lack, right? You're a spiritual being. There should be no lack of any kind. So you need to ask yourself, if you were a spiritual being, Okay, would you be in any sort of lack? You would not. No. So if you create yourself in this reality, why would you create yourself in lack? So that's another reason why I say, that most people don't have a plan. They just literally follow the footsteps of their parents.
Yeah,
They're
I really love that because it's so simple. Like, of course, like
very
why
simple.
why would I, like, as this grand being, choose to come here and struggle, like, financially or spiritually, or
Mhm.
through community? Like, I wouldn't, I'd want to have the
Right.
most optimal experience. So how do you feel about like duality and contrast?
Well, duality, I call it reference points. Absolutely. Reference points are basically telling you that you're not awakened. It basically tells you how close you are to your higher being. Again, your limitless self, your timeless self, or limitless self, and your time-bound self. So those contrasts or reflections or reference points, say like you get cancer. Okay, it's like, why do you get cancer? Well, it basically says that you're kind of off center, and you need to redirect yourself. This is where again, I'm not claiming to cure anybody, but this is where people start to awaken and they go, oh, I know who I am. I don't need that cancer anymore to reflect upon how far off I am. So in the spiritual community, people go, well, the more I suffer, the more I'm connected, or the more I'll be, say, rewarded afterwards. That's not the case at all. It basically means the more you suffer, the more out of sync you are where you should be on your path, and you should go back to that center. But then people go, well, and people are taught, it's like, well, I need to suffer more. I need to give myself more. I need to, help people in a way that I suffer and they benefit. All those things, again, keep you away or separate you from your spiritual path that you have. So that duality, or I would call it reference points. And I might not understand what duality in your definition is. So what is your definition of
No, no,
duality?
you're answering it so well. Like, you
Oh,
just
okay.
you just popped something open in my brain, like some little bubble just like burst, and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh
that's
my
beautiful.
goodness, that's it. There it is."
Yeah.
I love the idea that, well, I can have experienced contrast at some point in my life, and I do not have to continue experiencing contrast
Hmm.
as a reference point. Like, I've already experienced it, so I already know that
Absolutely.
at that point in my life, I was very far away from my actual being,
Right.
so I don't have to continue to experience it. Because at first, when you said it, I was thinking like, oh, and sort of, I never really hear you talk about ego. So I kind of want to get into that. But I sort of
Oh,
saw
sure.
like these two versions of myself, like this ego and this spirit. And the ego being like, we have to bounce back and forth so that we can get that great high of like remembering our
Mhm.
spirit. But I think it's just another trick. So yeah, if you can, you maybe talk a little bit about your interpretation of ego? I've never really heard you use that word.
Yeah, ego, it's really a fantastic tool if you use it right. The problem with this reality, first of all, is that most people, have redefined the real purpose, or the first definition, purpose on ego, love, honor, and all those things. They've redefined it, or basically they've mucked it up, to take them the wrong way. So we need to recalibrate all those definitions. So ego, in its pure definition, is that it allows you to understand the pure definition of ego. Again, it allows you to understand who you are as a grand being, and it forces you, or it gives you, and it creates enough power to pull that limitless being that you are into physical form even more. So you contain your limitless self, or your spirit. You can contain it in a physical form. Okay, because it takes a lot of ego to do that, by the way. Okay, so it's about you. The wrong way of ego is that, I'm highly intelligent, and then I'm going to hold on to my intelligence because that's who I think who I am. Because without that intelligence, I'm nobody. Does that make sense? So it's literally the opposite reflection. Or there's ego of, highly successful individuals. It's like, well, because, I have so much money, Therefore I know everything about everything, and I should be the expert on everything, and I could tell other people what to do. That's a huge ego, or because I'm a specific religious person, and I believe in this, and thousands or billions of people believe in this specific religion or this way, I'm going to hold on to this ego and shun everybody else because this is the right way. But if you look at all those three examples, if you're holding on to a physical identity here, you've lost yourself. So you've lost yourself so much into your intellect, your spiritual beliefs, or your wealth, or whatever in between, that people hold on to, because you're very, very insecure of who you are. So ego, again, is a gauge. So most people use ego, if the wrong kind of ego. By the way, the big people who have huge egos, right? And then they're jerks, basically. Let's just call it that. Basically, it's a gauge. It tells you, the right sort. It's like you're way off. You've lost yourself. So you have, now your power comes from something physical, money, spiritual, whatever, knowledge, beauty, control over people. Again, that's that gauge. Real ego gets you closer, where you again pull, and it tells you how connected you are, and that's where you become, say, benevolent, and you have power, you have great power, but you don't have to control anything like that. You don't have to control, you don't have to abuse, you don't have to do anything to destroy other people to define who you are. So in its sense, ego again allows you to go, gosh, I'm a grand being and I deserve it, right? I am that one. But if you use ego the proper way, you don't belittle anybody. You actually create, say, you don't, so improper ego creates, say, a separation of self and others. Proper ego goes, hey, you know what? I'm a grand being. Look at my light, look at the possibilities of me, and then and then that extends. It's like, oh yeah, you can be that light too, right? And it literally pulls people. If you have ego, or people call it charisma, you pull people to again within your light, and as you pull them in, it's like, gosh, I can turn my light on too. You know what I mean? And that's where, you get stronger and stronger.
So this kind of segues into something else that I wanted to ask you about, which was about frequency. So how can we be on different frequencies, but be having the same experience? So like, I kind of need you to define frequency a little bit for me. Like, is each individual operating on their own sort of radio dial, or like, is there a collective system of frequency?
Well, that's a whole lecture series. But yeah, so in a nutshell, everything is created of frequencies. For example, the color, any color, if you break it down, is a frequency, right? You modulate the frequency, it turns into a different color, or you modulate the frequency, it can turn into heat, or whatever. Or if sound is just a different frequency. So if you get deeper and deeper, like a piece of lead resonates at a certain frequency to create that components that we call lead, right? Or gold has a certain frequency. So if you think of everything as a frequency, and if you resonate at a certain frequency, it'll create an outcome, a physical, say, experience of that. For example, your hair color is a frequency that your genetics is resonating at, if that makes sense for you, right? So you are just a cumulative total of millions of different frequencies that I call your frequency signature. Okay. So that's that base concept. And again, I'm just giving you a very abbreviated version. And then your frequency of your life blueprint, right? That blueprint is like, if you run, say, abuse patterns, that's a general theme that people have. It's like they have one or two general frequencies that their whole life is dictated on. So no matter what they do, say that they're running a lucky frequency, no matter what they do, right? No matter what they do, it's always they're lucky, right? No matter what they do, they're lucky in love, lucky in money, they get into tight situations, they're lucky. So that's a frequency. So people start to, and what we do and what exponential intelligence is about is like, where's the origin of that frequency? So most people, they don't get to the origin or the source of how their frequency, works. Most people are in their heads. They're that mental state. They go, it's like what I do and what I think about, that could be it. But, your frequency of, say, abuse starts here because that's your original core, right? Or your master blueprint. And then, by the time you understand it and your life experiences, your point A, that's where you start, your origin of your frequency. But most people try to redirect their frequency at point Z. There's a lot of steps in between that created who you are. That makes sense to you. So there's different levels of frequencies. There's frequencies of physical form, and then there's frequencies of like knowing or connection, that knowing that you have a certain vibe. You walk into a room or you connect with people. That's a layer of frequency. Again, it's all physical. There's frequencies that are sent out by your heart or your chakra systems, and so on like that. And then there's a main frequency or the origin of your frequencies. And that's where you want to be. And that's the bridge. The origin of frequencies is the bridge between your timeless or your spirit self and your physical form. So imagine that, time and space is like a calm pond, just a water, which is really, really calm. Okay. To define who you are, you'd have to, or to see that water, for example, or to make it real, you put a ripple in it. And then you go, oh, that's water, if that makes sense. So your spirit, to create itself here in this reality, puts ripples in it, in certain, say, modulation. It puts a certain ripple into it, and it renders your body here. So
Wow.
that's in a nutshell. So if you change, and this is where I go, if you change your frequency, you change your life. Not if you change your mindset, because again, you just are changing the environment that's already you've created for yourself. So there's one main frequency. Again, how Earth has a certain frequency, hence we're all connected to that, and within that frequency, we create ourselves. Does that make sense? We create our family lineage and so on, and then within that, we create our definition of who we are, and these are how all those filters get created.
Wow. Yeah, I love the imagery of like this sort of water, and I love that so much because it really helps me understand it. And I love that this is what you do for people, that you assist them in changing their frequency. I think that I've heard testimonies from some of your students, and it's just incredible. So we're going to put all of your links in the liner notes of this episode. There'll be a link right here. Currently, Mas is doing a workshop for IONS, but you might be watching this 5 years in the future, so it's no longer there. But if you happen to be watching it between the months of July and October 2023, you can come and sign up for Mas's workshop series, which it's only been one workshop in, but already been so transformative. So I just want to thank you for taking time out to contributing to our community and sharing your spiritual knowledge with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time.